Okay, so I can edit anything out, right? So you can see it's recording now. And I'm going to edit anything out, especially all the ridiculous stuff that we don't want published, but maybe we'll keep it in.
Maybe.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Okay, everybody, welcome to the GROWQUIRE Show, all about grow and acquire. I'm really excited to introduce the very first guest on the show ever. She is amazing, incredible lady, very smart, intelligent. She was a bookkeeper for her entire career. She has moved all over Canada and lived in different parts of this amazing country, and just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to different kinds of housing. She's had an amazing financial journey, life journey, and I'm a little biased because she's my mother. And thought, what better way to start off the series with interviewing guests than to interview one of the very most special people to me in my life. So I'm thrilled that she can join us today. She's my mom, but she also is a person. And she has a name. Her name is Monique Meerseman-Moore. So I'm going to welcome her to the show.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Well, hello, Monique. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
I think I'll still call you Mom because Monique is weird, and I only call you that when I'm trying to get your attention and you haven't responded to Mom. So, but I think I have your attention now.
Yes, you.
Oh, good. Welcome to the GROWQUIRE Show. GROWQUIRE. You know what? Someone reached out to me the other day, and they were like, I want to talk to you about your GROWQUIRE Show. And I was like, well, I'm supportive, but it's GROWQUIRE, grow and acquire. But thank you so much for thinking of me. Anyway, I thought we should talk about this first because I'm really launching the show still, right? And this is a made-up word, grow and acquire combined together, and kind of comical. I've been making up words since, I don't know.
Since you were 4.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm still making up words. So
it is still a word.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, I know you, but the audience does not. So why don't you give us a little bit of background on who are you? And start maybe at the beginning, but I also want you to talk about your artwork and what you do now.
Okay.
So let's hear about you.
Okay, well, I'll start with now and then we can go backwards. So I am a retired bookkeeper. I did bookkeeping from 92 till last year, 2026, January 2026. And I am giving all my attention to my art right now, fine arts. And I'm doing a little bit of teaching online and also in person, passing on everything that I've been taught. And really excited. I'm still trying to find my style because I like everything. So anyway, that's what I do now. I am really glad to not be doing bookkeeping anymore, but I really enjoyed it while I was doing it. And because of moving around so much in my life for different reasons, I had to work under a lot of different accountants who have their own way of doing things. So accounting and bookkeeping, financial planning is actually very creative. I know people wouldn't think of it that way. They think of numbers as boring, but there is, I don't know if all of you remember that when we took math in school, there's more than one way to do math, and showing your work was always required, and I always end up doing it the fast way, and then I didn't even know how I got there. So anyway, I was never really good in math, but bookkeeping is more about putting things where they belong, administrative oversight. Had my own business for a while and needed to understand how to report to the government and did that for 7 years, and then ended up working for small mom and pop shops doing their bookkeeping because I could understand the whole picture. Whereas if you work for a corporation, you may only be doing part of bookkeeping, like maybe accounts payable or receivable, collecting, so forth. There was a bankruptcy in my life. It actually happened in a different province. Every province has their own regulations for bankruptcy. It was actually almost 30 years ago. So what the rules and regulations are now, I can't answer to that. I could only give a description of my experience and all the favor that I received during that time was absolutely phenomenal. So being afraid of where you might live when you're going through that kind of a thing, there are ways to do that. So we can cover that. And then going back even farther, I was a single mom at 21, and I had to figure out how to do life in the most positive way for my son. So I decided to go back to school for an ECE equivalent to do home providing so that I could actually stay home, open up my own small daycare, and stay with my son. So I spent almost 5 hours a day commuting from different places. When I was a single mom, I didn't want to burden anybody. So for housing, I contacted close family members and friends and asked if I could stay at their place for 2 weeks. And then I went to the next place for 2 weeks and the next place for 2 weeks. One place I actually stayed 4 or 5 weeks, another place 6, just so that I wouldn't be a burden to people, but I could get myself back on my feet. And so that was really great. I just had a room with my son and went to school. And then the daycare that I trained at was a training daycare. It was the best one in Toronto at the time. They had 100 babies. And so because I was a single mom, I was actually able to get subsidized daycare for my son. So I started taking him with me to school, and I would go into the classroom and he'd be around the corner in the daycare. So we spent all day commuting there, 2.5 hours in the morning and 3.5 hours going home. And he would sleep part of the way, and otherwise I'd read to him. We'd have fun. At least we were together. So that was for 20 weeks.
I got to stop you there.
That's my experience. Yeah.
I want to stop you there because when we were talking, we did a little bit of a run through a couple days ago. There's so much I don't know about you, right? You were commuting on the bus 6 hours a day with your son to get to school and put yourself through college, right? Yeah. And you were a single mom.
Yeah.
How old was your son, my brother?
Okay, so he was about 4 months old, 5 months. He was 5 months old when I started the program. And so my best friend's mom actually babysat him while I went. And then once I got approved for subsidy, which was only a couple of weeks, maybe not even a week, I was able to start bringing him with me. And so it was amazing. It was really hard, but I was 21. So I was young and I just did it for my own mental health. Yeah. For my own mental health too. I could have gone on welfare for single moms at the time. They called it something else. It's not, they don't call it the same things anymore, but basically you get paid for, when you have a child at home and you're not able to work. But I actually made less money doing work at the time. It's not the same now. at the time than staying home and going into Ontario housing, subsidized housing, and just staying home with my son. But I knew for my own mental health that I would not do well. And I wanted my son to be in a decent neighborhood. And so I just made myself do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And we're going to get a little bit deeper into the story here. So I've moved 22 times. I think about 15 of those times is with you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the most memorable places you and I have lived together. Now, before we really launch into this episode, I really want to put it into perspective. We are Canadian, right? I get chills just saying that. We are extremely blessed to have been born in this country. Both of your parents came from elsewhere. They both came from Holland. We're so lucky they did that, right? And now I'm getting emotional, but it's true. So this entire episode, I just want to keep that into perspective. We want to share stories that we think are going to benefit people. Hopefully this resonates with people, just to share something that happened that was similar to us. But this episode is by no means woe is us. We're not victims, right? No. We just want to share, and hopefully it helps people. We're Canadian, and we're surrounded by a world of opportunity just by being in this country. So I had to say that, right? Now let's get into the fun parts. Let's talk about different places we've lived together. The top most memorable places for me. The first one is the shed. We were living in a shed. It sounds really bad, but this is why it happened. So my parents, you guys were in construction. And Dad had pretty much every license and trade and ticket under his belt, and he could build a house with his bare hands, and has. So you bought a property that had a framed house, but the house wasn't done. There was no plumbing. It was just framed, and there was a shed on the property that was insulated and had a concrete slab floor. I remember the concrete floor. But how long did we live in the shed for before we moved?
Almost a year. It was considered to be the guest house. So he built a little guest house. The gentleman that owned the property built a little guest house first before beginning to build the big house. Yeah. That's
interesting that it was a guest house, because he didn't finish it either. So, but it makes sense why it was insulated, right? And there was running water and everything. Because in my mind, it was a shed because it's a concrete slab floor. And I don't think there was drywall.
Actually, there was no running water. And
that's right. We had to use the outhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Here's the shovel. Here's a shovel, Jenny.
Yeah, I remember that. So yeah, there was no running water at first, but but you guys did eventually bring water into the guest house. But I don't think there was drywall sheets either. Like I remember insulation, like you could see the insulation, right? But it had the plastic cover over top of it, the orange insulation. Yeah. So like me, I think I was 3 years old when we moved there from Ontario. Cambridge, Ontario to Edgewood. The shed was in Edgewood, British Columbia, very small part of the Kootenays and Arrow Lakes outside of the Okanagan. Beautiful part of British Columbia. Stunning place to grow up nature-wise. Wow. But so let's go from the shed. And then after the shed, we moved to someone's guest house for a period of time, while you guys did construction on a house that was by the lake. So I remember visiting the house while it was under construction and then moving in. So it's like going from a shed to someone's guest house temporarily to then this massive, beautiful, I think massive, probably like 2,000 square feet above grade. That's big in my mind. 4-bedroom, including on the attic, right, that you guys finished. To me, that's a big house, right? So it's on the lake. And mountains in the backdrop, like just stunning. So big contrast. And like for you, it's so cool to have this conversation with you as an adult now. What was it like, hauling 3 kids around, making all of these moves, just doing what you can to get started with your finances for your family? Like, what was that like?
Well, it was an adventure for sure. Not your typical adventure. I think most of our family thought we were crazy. But it was an adventure, and it was an opportunity to acquire, as your show is called, acquire land and a possible home that had value for less than it would normally cost if you bought something already finished. So it was a really great experience. Yeah.
I also liked your answer. I'm going to jog your memory here because a couple days ago when we did our run through, you said, I never really looked at it that way because of how my parents grew up and the house I grew up in, and your dad and his parents, like, they were really hardworking people. We didn't come from money on either side.
Yeah.
And, if you're coming from my generation talking about this, people might go, you guys lived in a shed? But your answer was, and I'm going to leave it to you to answer and jogging your memory here, right?
Yeah. So here's the thing that even now, like at the beginning, when we first started chatting here, it's really coming to the forefront of my mind that, so my parents were in Holland in their formative years during World War II. And a lot of Dutch people and Europeans in general wanted to make a new start and get away from their country of origin. And some of them had difficult family issues, but some of them just wanted a fresh start. And Canada was really a good place to come. My parents researched it, but I mean, they came over on a boat in 1953, landed in the Montreal harbor. And they came with nothing, and they weren't poor by any means, but they weren't wealthy either. There was a call for farmers. So even though my parents are both from Amsterdam and we're city people, they thought, you know what, let's just do this. So they ended up in Alliston area in Southern Ontario, and the conditions were not good at all. Some people had great experiences because we've met some along the way that were treated super well, and they did end up doing farming, and it was great. But my parents' experience wasn't very good. The conditions were really terrible. So my dad went to Toronto, stayed with a distant relative of my mom's for a couple of weeks till he could get a job. And then he came back and got my mom, and they moved to Toronto, and they started building their life there. And they lived in a basement apartment with a hot plate, and that was not considered like terrible at the time. So many other immigrants are doing the same thing. And it was just, you just start at the bottom, especially when you're in your 20s, because they were in their 20s. And then you just, work until you build yourself up. So by the time they were, so I think it took them 6 years, between 5 and 8 years anyway, before they could buy a house. So I put a down payment on a new build in a very northern suburb of Toronto. And back then, my dad was a salesman for a Toronto newspaper. And my mom stayed home, and she typed, like she would do part-time work. She would type up things for people, and they would just not buy, you never went out for dinner. My mom made all her own clothes. They watched their money, but the whole street was doing the same thing too. It was just part of the culture, like Canadian or immigrant or whatever. We were all in the same boat pretty much. And you just really worked hard, and it sounds so crazy, but the saying that I grew up hearing was a penny saved, a penny earned, but also spend a penny, save a penny. Like, you don't be so cheap that you aren't spending anything, but you need to save and manage your money, and you need to think about what you're buying. And but putting your like elbow grease into something and knowing that it's not that way forever. I think my parents were so good at advising us, like teaching us that, from their own example. I mean, they grew up in the war for 5 years. They were going through hell. And so we better not complain about, something like trivial, like, if we were sick, if we had the flu, suck it up, go to school. You're not missing school. You're not dying. Just keep working. It was a different world. And like I said, a lot of other families were the same. It wasn't just my family.
Yeah.
And so I think we grew up pretty fast. I had a job from the time I was 10 because I wanted to buy, like, my parents we always had enough money for like shoes, coats, like that. My mom made most of our clothes until we got too old, and then it was like, I'm not wearing that, forget it. But she said, if you want to buy a nice top from Smart Set or Le Chateau, you're going to have to get a job and save up and buy it yourself, because we can't afford that. And I never really thought of us as not having money. They gave us piano lessons, but there was no going out for dinner. There was no just buying what you want. In fact, on our street, we all knew the one family that could, because both parents were working. And back then, usually only the dad was working. And so from the time I was 10, I got a paper route. And then with the money I saved, I would get what I wanted. And then I learned about buying something impulsively and then being disappointed and all those lessons. And another thing that I think is really missing today, they're actually talking about it, putting it into the Canadian curriculum in education, at least in Ontario, is teaching children how to budget. And when I was 10, the representative from the Toronto Star came and taught me how to write a check and how to collect money from my customers.
Wow.
And every 2 weeks, I would have to take the money that I collected from my customers, go to the bank, and I opened up a bank account in my own name. There was no parental, you didn't have to have parental approval. You could have your own bank account. And so I had my own bank account, and I would put money in there, and then I would write a check against that amount of money and send it into the Toronto Star. And I learned that at 10. Like, there's people that grow up and don't even know how to balance their checkbook. Like,
yeah,
it was just normal. It was just normal. But you know what? It also gave such a sense of, I'm in charge of my money.
I got this. I make money, and I know how to spend it, and I know how to save it, and at such a young age too.
Yeah, and there was one family, they would always say, I don't have change. Can you come back later? Like, honestly, 35 cents for a newspaper. Come on, people. But anyway, then I had to learn about, like, cutting off a customer and claiming a delinquent account to my representative at the Toronto Star. And that was kind of scary. But also, you know what? It was an education, because when you go collecting from people, my mom said this to me. She said, Oma, your Oma. She said to me, you know what? I wanted to quit so many times. I hated it after a while, because when I got older, it wasn't cool to take newspapers around, right? Because I did it for 5 years. So when I was 12, I was like, this is so embarrassing. I don't want to do this job anymore. Okay, well, then you can't buy anything anymore. And they wouldn't let me quit, really. And then she said, you know what? When you go into someone's home and you're collecting money, you are learning something about people. It's an education. And so it's true. Going into someone's house that kind of smells weird, or the people are kind of scary. I mean, nowadays you don't want your children going into a strange home, but
No,
we
it's a
probably
lot.
wait
A lot has
outside.
changed
I
since
know,
these
but
Toronto Star newspaper days. Like,
oh
it's
yeah,
incredible. Yeah.
absolutely.
So
So
I
anyway,
want to
yeah,
switch gears here a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah. I know I
Um,
could go on forever. Sorry.
yes, I'm gonna rein you in here because
Yeah.
I really want you to share whatever you feel comfortable sharing regarding your experience as an adult, a mother with a family with 3 kids, what your experience was like going through bankruptcy. I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'd
Sure,
love to
sure.
hear that story.
I think it's really important to say, to preface my story, that this is everybody's bankruptcy is completely different from each other. And also the things that we had favor of in our life during the bankruptcy is not common. But I'll explain what I mean by that. So this does not go for today. Again, it was 30 years ago. It was very upsetting to us because everybody's got a different story. Some people go bankrupt because it's their fault and they have missed something or they didn't know something they should be doing. Sometimes it's because you're not getting paid by your vendors, which was in our case, that was the case. So you have to remit HST on your sales in construction to the government. It needs to be the first thing. And if you fall behind, the penalties and interest are like the worst thing in the country, like worse than going for one of those cash places where you borrow money or visas or whatever. It's the worst. What happens is if you don't pay, this is just generically speaking, you get a penalty added to what you owe, and then it is compounded daily with interest, a penalty interest. There's two interests. I can't remember everything. Again, it's 30 years ago. And what happened was what we owed was really quite small. But by the time a year and a half was over, it actually was 10 times the amount because of that. In the place that I was living at the time, the same vendor, which I will remain nameless, also didn't pay. I don't know, there was quite a few contractors that were doing different part of this build in British Columbia. A few of them went under as well and lost their business, and it was really devastating to the community. It was a small community, so everybody knew everybody, and it was very shameful. And because when you're used to being responsible with your money and then this happens, it's devastating. But we soon found out after a while that other people have gone through it as well, and that there are ways to navigate through that you can come out on top. So the initial shock was really difficult. And also, this is something I've never talked about in public, but it's been something that's been really upsetting, is the government actually threatened us with freezing our bank accounts and taking our home, and that if we didn't pay and we didn't pay by a certain date, they were going to come and lock our house up and this and that. And we found out later from going through the proper procedure of bankruptcy, which I'll get into in just a moment, they're not allowed to do that. And it was just this one person that we were dealing with who was like that. In fact, there was friends of ours in the community that also were facing penalties and interest on not paying HST because of their business. And it was actually a seasonal logging business, and everything had dried up, and it's part of the business. But they got a really great representative from the government who worked with them and helped them do set up a payment plan to pay it back. And this gentleman that we had said, no, we're not doing that, and kept threatening and stuff. Anyway, to make a long story short, we didn't know that he couldn't do that. So you're reacting to the situation because, I mean, it's the government. You should be able to, you're supposed to trust what's happening. Anyway, we ended up having to, you are not, into the bankruptcy actual procedure. So the best thing to do, so I'm going to speak out to people out there that might be in a situation. The best thing to do is to seek out a bankruptcy trustee in your area. Now, in British Columbia, the rules and regulations were different than Ontario. And I do believe that Ontario has the strictest bankruptcy policies and procedures. So when I say that, what that means is you're not allowed to own any assets except for the minimal things to work. For instance, you can have an old car that doesn't have any value left in it, as long as it's not above a certain amount. You can't own a home. You can't have any RRSPs. You have to remit all of your remit assets that you might have in trust to the trustee, and that gets held in trust by a trustee. And a bankruptcy trustee their job is to be neutral between the person or people or companies going bankrupt and the creditors that have a right to being paid from what you owe them. There's not supposed to be any partiality at all. And so every decision that you make once you've entered into bankruptcy and you've relinquished all your bank accounts are frozen, your assets are frozen. If you have a mortgage on your home, which was our case, the bank has the possibility of losing out on that if the value cannot be reclaimed after the bankruptcy is over. So everything kind of gets frozen for 7 years. So what happened to us is we were in such a small community. And again, this was British Columbia, not Ontario. And it was a very unusual situation. There was no places to live for rent because it was the valley, right? So there's a few little apartments and stuff like that. But we had an opportunity, and something, I honestly cannot remember all the details, but we didn't end up owning a home again because the mortgage was less than rent. So we had to ask for approval from our bankruptcy trustee first, if it was okay. And we also had to have a co-signer, a guarantor, to be responsible if anything happened until.
Who was your guarantor?
Actually, it was the gentleman that sold us the house.
Wow. So the real estate agent?
Yes.
That's so special.
Yeah, like I said, it was a small community and everybody knew what happened. I think if you were in a big city and it was a corporate thing, like it would, I don't know, I think, and you know what? I even could be wrong how I'm remembering who did what. I honestly don't. It could have, I think Opa Huff might have helped as well. Yeah, I think he helped as well, which was so humiliating. And that's the thing that I want to say to people is, you know what? You can't go through this by yourself. You need people to help, and it's temporary, but some people really judge and they're upset. Like I know Opa Huff did co-sign something with us, and it was 5 years. And I thought in my 30s, I thought, oh my gosh, 5 years like of paying this back. And he was so encouraging. Like, he was a numbers person too. He actually taught me how to do bookkeeping because he was a retired chartered accountant for the Toronto School Board. So anyway, he said, you know what? 5 years is going to go by fast. And at that age, I'm like, oh, but it did. And we survived. And you weren't during the bankruptcy. When you are in bankruptcy, it's actually considered protection. So what bankruptcy, the definition of bankruptcy, and I'm going to botch
Mom,
it up.
I'm going to stop you there. I can hear the guys.
Okay, hang on one sec.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy, eh?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Bankruptcy sounds so intimidating, but it is actually protection. And people, I'm going to botch it up for sure, because people that are in this field are going to have the proper way of saying things. So I'm just saying it in layman's term. It's actually to protect you while you get through it. And it's supposed to protect the creditors too. So, and it's supposed to actually help you. It's actually forgiving you for your debt. And then you're able to start over, which seems absolutely amazing. And it is. So credit card companies, they lost everything that we owed. They had to write it off. Same with a supplier. Anyway, a few things. And that is really, to us, it was very hurtful, because you want to remain honorable, Anyway, we had some great suppliers, and they said, hey, you know what? We're going to write it off. And of course, they weren't happy about it. But at the end, they also knew the story. So I think that made a big difference. And we had a lot of favor and a lot of help and a lot of encouragement. Once a few people found out that we had gone bankrupt, they came out and made themselves known. Hey, I went through it too, and it's not your fault, and you're going to get through this. And they gave us their story. So hopefully this might help somebody as well. And it seems like 7 years is such a long time to not have credit. Your credit rating is horrible. So, but you just start again. You just don't give up, and you do what you have to do, and you learn to buy things cash, because that's the only way you can do it. But honestly, when you go bankrupt, you are legally allowed to start another business the very next day, because the government does not take away your right to make a living and pay for yourself.
I think that may have changed. So I'm not an expert at this.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not an expert.
But maybe one day you can have a guest on who actually is versed in bankruptcy.
Yeah, because I think now, I would have to verify this, but what I've been told is you can't be a director or a shareholder in any company if you've claimed personal bankruptcy, right? So, and again, you said the rules are different. I think that's specific to Ontario. So yeah, it would be interesting to have an expert on for sure. I just want to try and wrap up this part of the conversation.
Yeah. You made a good point that I'll just quickly interject here, is that we were a sole proprietorship. And that makes a big difference. The rules are different for everything. Anyways, yeah. So just ending this part of the conversation on bankruptcy, we've talked about the mechanics of what happened. What advice would you give people who are going through bankruptcy now regarding their soul and regarding their spirit and restoration to your spirit? Because you used an important word. It was humiliating, right? That shame, that humiliation. How did you move through those difficult emotions? What would you share with people facing the same? Well, as you know, I have a really strong faith. So for me, I got a lot of support from my church and people praying for us. But honestly, it was also, like I was mentioning before, people that had previously gone through bankruptcy themselves had tidbits of wisdom to help us too, and also to take away the stigma of bankruptcy. And I think knowing that it was not planned, because after getting to know our bankruptcy trustee really well, there are people that do it on purpose and they abuse the system. And that was not our case. And once they got to know us and knew that it was not our case, they treated us really well. And they looked up, what is an okay way with all the rules and regulations that we could do or not do. And it's humbling. But what happens to you isn't who you are, it's how you handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really hard to not point fingers, especially at the gentleman that really screwed us from the, like getting to the point where you can relinquish all that. Honestly, I must tell you that when you asked me about sharing, it still hurts.
Yeah, of course.
It still hurts. And the decisions that I made at the time were not right. They weren't good and hurt a lot of people because I didn't have any knowledge. And I'll tell you, if you are experiencing the thought of going bankruptcy, do your homework first and get as much information as you can, because just because somebody is even like a financial advisor, it doesn't mean they know everything. Get more than one opinion. It's like when you want to put a furnace in your house and you get 3 quotes, like honestly, because there are good people out there and bad in every field, whether it's financial advising, bankruptcy trustee. So really don't be afraid and embarrassed, and reaching out for support will make a ton of difference. Yeah.
I think what you said about what happens to you is not who you are. That's a really special statement. I think it's very true and probably lands with everybody who's going through a difficult financial crisis like this. I want to try and wrap up this part. Thank you so much. It means the world that you were willing to open up and share that. Now, I want to end with something. We haven't done a run through on this. I know. I'm throwing a real like surprise here at you, but we didn't do a run through on this. I want to kind of ask you, what have been, if you had to use just a few words, what have been the highlights of your life?
Oh, wow. Okay, well, you know what? Growing up in the neighborhood that we grew up in was so much fun. Oh my gosh. Like my sister and I had so much fun because our house backed onto a creek and we would play with the neighborhood kids down there. And my dad built a tree house and the whole neighborhood loved it. And it was his little trick to get everybody to come over so he could keep an eye on us and not be worried about where we were, because everybody's going to want to come to our house. Anyway, we played a version of hide and seek, which is called Kick the Can, and tons of games. And like back then you didn't move around as much. And I'm really sorry that you missed out on that part. Although so many other people move around, life is different today. But basically you had the same group of kids growing up from kindergarten all the way to college. So you get to know these group of people. You might not hang around with them, but it's familiar, Anyway, that was a really, really great. And I mean, we we went skating, ice skating every day after school when we got older, and growing up in that neighborhood was really fun. And the other one or two words, that didn't happen, did it?
I know it's tough.
Actually, the adventures that we did go on, like to British Columbia, taking you guys had so much fun being able to jump off the cliff into the pond, and
I didn't jump. I still would not jump.
Right.
No, that's for other people with bravery.
But not worrying about your kids being in the bad neighborhood, and you're in a land in the middle of nowhere and having fun. And people were also not materialistic there, because their money went into their toys. And when I say that, I mean, it might be old and beat up, but their skidoos and their boats and their, it was on quality of life, not quantity, and not everybody was like that, but all of our friends are pretty much like that. So that was really special. I think another highlight was your Grams catching a fish on the Columbia River, going, "Ooh, Bobby, I got a fish, Bobby, I got a fish." Stuff like that was really, really
You do a
great.
pretty good impression.
And being able to now, art was always burning in my soul. I drove everybody crazy because I'd say, "Oh, look at that. I want to paint that," And now I'm actually doing it, and my dreams are coming true, and I've been able to sell some of my work, and I'm hoping that will grow. But money's not my main focus. I just really need to create and hopefully make some works that other people will give them pleasure to have in their homes, So I just feel great about that. And I also feel that one of my greatest accomplishments is you guys, my kids. Watching you guys springboard into your life and being a part of that and watching you grow. We never stop growing as people. I still feel like I'm 14 in my head. I don't feel like I've made it at all. And what are we doing next?
All right. Well, that's actually a perfect place to end this episode. But where can people find you? What is your website for your artwork if people want to check out what you're working on?
Okay. So it's moniquesartplace.com.
So Monique, MONIQUES, art, ART, place.com.
Yes. And that you can also find me on Facebook under the same, without the com.
Without the com. Oh, I love it. Monique's Art Place. I love it. Well, Monique, mother, thank you so much for a very special conversation. Meant the world to me. And I think it's going to touch people too who have gone through similar experiences. And I just deeply say thank you for having me and for coming on the show. I just really appreciate it.
Well, I feel honored to be the first person, and I hope this does really well and that it continues to reach out to people and help them, because everybody needs as much as they can get today.
All right. Thank you so much. Oh, what a special conversation. Wow. I'm just completely touched. Thank you very much for listening to today's show, the GROWQUIRE Show, where we talk about how you grow and acquire and how your life choices connect with relationships and your financial journey, how it all intersects. We'll see you on the next episode.